Okay, let's pray. Thank you, Father, for the privilege of studying again. We ask for your direction. We pray that the things that we consider would be based firmly on the Word of God, and then where cultural application is apropos, we would understand how to apply it. Thank you for the uniformity of your gospel message. Thank you that no matter where we go in this world, no matter what language people speak, or no matter what the customs of their communities may be, the gospel of Jesus Christ can make inroads. And we pray that you would help us to keep that front and center as we study these customs. I pray in Jesus' name, amen. All right, so I'm going to these are not in your notes, but I just want to talk about some other aspects. Some of them are just quick slides like this. Pantomime, you guys ever done pantomimes? Probably most everybody has. And pantomime emphasizes body language, okay? In fact, I'll show you a slide in just a moment of a lot of different types of communication that actually are scientifically studied. You ever play this game? The only problem with this, the fundamental problem is that nobody's going to hear anything unless the line is tight, right? If you do that, you got to hold the line tight so the vibration happens. So we talked about that. Who's responsible, the speaker or the listener, right? Whose fault is it? Now, in the Word of God, Paul asked this question. I asked, have they not heard? Now, he knew they had heard. It's a rhetorical question, and yet, is it possible that Paul might be asking, did God explain it well? Did they actually hear? Did God do a good job of communicating it to them? See? And of course, the answer is they're totally responsible. Did Israel not understand? Again, you could say, did God explain it right? And so, it's an interesting way of looking at it. And in here, obviously, he holds Israel totally responsible. All right. Thought that was kind of good. Be careful in a culture that you don't misunderstand gestures or smiles, because it's possible that, especially if you're a foreigner, people will put on the good face, the good front, in order to make you, it may be to make you feel welcome there, but it also may be so that they look good, to a visitor. They don't want you to misjudge them, and so sometimes and you need to be really, really careful, especially in the flat world. And what's the flat world again? Oh, by the way, is this on? Yeah. What's the flat world? We've talked about it, haven't we? Oh, well, no, that's a good guess. That's a good guess. Yeah. The flat world is an expression we use in travel to refer to tourist places where everybody, like major airports, you can go to international airports and find pretty much the same thing. There are some exceptions. I've heard of some. But by and large, major international airports seek to lay out the red carpet for everybody, so you know what to expect. It's the touristy part. You can go to most any country in the world and still find, Marriott or something nice in the major cities. Now, when you start wandering off into the rural areas, get out of the urban centers, then you begin to discover what that culture is really like. Okay, so the flat world is that area that's really touristy appropriate it's prepared for people that don't want to have to go out and stay in some, really different kind of a place. All right. I thought this was interesting. Let me give you just a little, again, if you want to write these down, you can. Otherwise, just look at it. Kinesics, or body movements, say a lot. You guys are communicating right now. Just by sitting there. Now, your communication is pretty uniform right now. A little later on in the class, when heads begin to, and the communication varies a little more. I'm communicating even by moving from this position back to here, or doing something else. We do that without thinking. And then there's vocalics, or paralanguage, that includes volume, rate, pitch, timbre. Is timbre the right pronunciation, ladies? I thought timbre. It all has to do with how we communicate. Personal appearance, our physical environment, or the artifacts or objects that compose it. Thinking about this guy's desk, he got 4 cups of coffee here. What are they communicating by that? It's gonna be a long day. These guys are trying to keep going. Coffee, coffee, coffee. Okay, the paper halfway off the desk. I mean, there are definitely things being communicated there about that. Proxemics. Isaac, come on up here a second. I want to talk to you. All right. Why'd you stop there?
This is distance I normally stand from people.
Why don't we talk like this?
I don't know, that's not super normal for me.
He's sweating up here. No. Yeah, and I'm a little nervous too to get this close, right? Okay, he knew right where to stand. Nobody had to say, okay, no, stop right there. He knew exactly where to go because these are culturally conditioned. Okay, thanks, you can sit down. Yeah, that's proxemics. If you go to Brazil or Peru or Chile, you're probably going to stand a whole lot closer, right, than you do in the US. What country in the world would you expect to stand the farthest away from each other? What part of the world? No, actually in the Middle East, they tend to stand very close. You can be right in people's face when you're talking. Not everywhere, not everybody, but as a general rule. Where would you go to find people standing farther apart? Yeah, and especially Eastern Europe, Russia, they stand even farther apart. I went to a museum once where they had different footprints embedded, somehow in the floor, and by each one they showed you, where people who live in a certain part of the world would stand in relation to somebody else. It was very interesting. And Russia at that time, I think it was Soviet Union, was one of the farthest ones. Yeah. In Japan, Lana, do they tend to stand close together when they speak or farther apart? Farther apart. Okay. Yeah. They what? Mm-hmm. Okay. So if a Japanese person goes to Korea, it's a little uncomfortable being that close to people when they're talking. That's interesting. It'd be interesting to dig into the reasons for that. What do you happen to know why that would be, the difference between Japan and Korea? Probably have to go back a ways in history and, the earlier days of their culture. Yeah. Interesting. Very interesting. Okay. Haptics or touch. Yeah. I had to watch out for this because in Brazil, everybody's, hugs and they touch a lot. And, I keep home on furlough, I'm hugging my pastor, I'm hugging, and it gets a little awkward. I had to remember, wait a minute, I'm not in Brazil. Okay, I can't do it. In fact, guys, when they hug, and believe me, this is not at all immoral, okay? If I'm, I won't do this. Come here, Isaac. No, you don't want to do this one. if I put my arm around you, guys will put it, and sometimes he'll even kind of rub the other guy's belly a little bit, just as a gesture of friendship. And you're thinking, ew. And I had guys do that. They'd kind of, and I'm thinking, what are you doing? Checking my waistline, But it was just a way of showing friendship. There are cultures where men will hold hands and walk together, and it has absolutely nothing to do with homosexuality. Nothing. So, these are all very, very fascinating studies. And then chronemics have to do with time, okay? And that's what we just talked about before. All right, and we did this last time too. In most cultural dimensions, it's equally difficult to cross over, but in the context realm, it's harder for a low context person to move to a high context situation. Then let me just shoot some passages at you. I'm not going to take time even to read all these, but just remember the Elijah fixes his gaze on the king, stares at him until the point where, he's completely, nervous and awkward about it. And he felt embarrassed. In some cultures, when it comes to communication, it is essential and appropriate to use an intermediary rather than you confronting someone yourself. And this is especially true when people of two different classes or two different levels on the social ladder, have a confrontation. In order to save face or to show respect, you'll often find somebody to intercede. Yeah, gossip can happen, but if you do it properly, the purpose of bringing this person in is, and it's understood by both parties. Both parties usually recognize that an intermediate person is essential in hearing and communicating in an appropriate manner to both sides. It's not considered gossip. It has to be somebody who's mutually trusted. If there's not a mutual trust, then it won't work. Yeah. Yep. We do that in our legal system today all the time. That's what a lawyer is. A lawyer is an intermediary. Once in a while, you hear somebody say, I'm going to represent myself. Okay? But normally, you bring in a lawyer. Yeah. That's a good question. Yep. It's not something we do typically, you know? Okay. In Luke 7, the centurion doesn't go to Jesus, but notice he sends elders of the Jews to Jesus saying, come and heal my servant. And then in verse 6, he sent friends saying, Lord, do not trouble yourself. So why did the centurion not do it? Because he didn't believe that he was worthy to confront Jesus personally, which is really interesting. He's a Gentile, he's a Roman. And yet, because he doesn't feel worthy to approach Jesus personally, he sends somebody on his behalf. Fascinating. And it's not cowardice. See, we in the West will tend to look at something like that as maybe being an act of cowardice. You just don't have the guts to stand up to somebody. That's not the point here. It's a question of respect and saving face. Q&A is a good way to communicate when you're dealing with a touchy subject. Jesus says, who do men say that I am? Who do you say that I am? He kind of eases that discussion toward the declaration of himself as the Son of God. He uses parables a lot. And notice what happens in verse 45. After he tells this parable, the Pharisees and the chief priests, they get it. They know that he's speaking about them, but he didn't speak to them directly and accuse them. He did it by means of a parable. Still gets his point across, but does it in a creative way. When's it appropriate to do that? When is it not? Depends. It's the best answer I can give you. Here's another one. A certain money lender had two debtors. This parable has a question. Remember, this is Simon. The lady has washed his feet. And so, he tells us, and then he asks Simon, which one of them love him more? And so Simon is compelled to answer, the one, I suppose, for whom he canceled the larger debt. And Jesus says to him, you've answered correctly. Now, that you say, that sounds honorable. Jesus says, you got it right. But at the same time, Jesus is saying, you got it wrong. What did he get wrong? The way that he judged the woman who washed his feet. You see? So Jesus is actually able to say something respectful to this guy while at the very same time pointing his finger at him and saying, you messed up. Isn't that interesting? That's the type of thing. That's an art. That's not something you just learn in a textbook. That's something that takes a lot of experience and wisdom and perception to do. All right. Yeah, so he turns to the woman and he says, see, Simon? And then he lets him have it, basically. All right? This one. Nathan says to David, you are the man. You all know that story. He didn't just come in and say, hey, what's going on? He tells a parable via that story. And he sets him up. And David, the answer that David gives, this guy should die. It's probably more than Nathan was even expecting him to say. He just fell right into the trap. Then there's very direct, Paul, and this is Paul. What would you expect from Paul? Paul wasn't one. Paul confronts Peter publicly when he comes to Antioch. He says, "What are you doing?" And he was right in doing so. All right, I'm going to skip that. Well, yeah, if you're starting a conversation with a new friend, asking questions is always a good idea. Now, see this? So what do you do for a living? In our country, if you're getting to know somebody for the first time, that question is okay for the most part. Although, when I came to college, I'm a city slicker, I came here, I didn't know anything about farming. And I would ask a guy, so how many acres do you have? I thought that was a good question. And I learned later on, somebody said, don't ask him that question. Why not? Why don't you ask a farmer how many acres he has? Maybe you do. I was told don't do that. Yeah. This guy may have 2,000 acres, but he may be surrounded by neighbors who have 3,000 or 4,000 acres. I come as a city slicker and I say, wow, that's cool. You got a lot of land. And I end up misunderstanding the guy altogether. How many head of cattle do you have? Now maybe that's changed. Maybe people do that, but I was just warned to be careful about that. So in our culture, that may not be the best. I'm sorry. Well, that was an exception to our culture. Generally in the West, this type of question is okay. Shortly into the conversation, he says, what do you do for a living? And they're not offended by that. But if I ask how many millions do you have in the bank, that's probably going a little over the top. This one works almost everywhere. So tell me about your family. That one, east, west, north, south, doesn't matter where you are in the world, that question, that type of an introduction to a conversation is usually okay. All right. We got any final questions about communication, direct, indirect, and just a few ideas I wanted to throw at you there at the end. Okay, let's go on to lifestyle. Do you live to work or do you work to live? Well, right now, that question is a little easier to answer, right? Yeah, you're working just to survive college right now. And look, if it's any comfort at all, I do not believe, I would never say to a student, you think it's rough now, wait till you get out there in the real world. I don't think it's any rougher than it is in college. It's just a different kind of rough when you get out there, but it's not. Because I heard that when I was in college, I thought, man, do I really want to do this? I mean, I'm looking forward to getting through 4 years. If it's going to be worse after that, So anyway, how many of you, no, I'm going to save that question for later. Here we go. This is from this website cited below. Should time be spent primarily on being productive, or is it more liberally dispersed across various obligations in life? This is the debate that surrounds the being versus doing cultural value. This is not in your notes, in case you're looking for it. Okay. The Scandinavian countries are some of the most being cultures in the world. The US is a strong doing culture organized around performance and achieving results. Work is both a passion and preoccupation. Who in here would say I'm more of the being orientation than I am the doing orientation? I'm more concerned about quality of life than I am about quantity, getting things done, being productive. Anybody like? Okay, and I would expect you two to raise your hands. You come from cultures that are more being oriented. Yeah, but that, again, always remember that some of this is personality and background too. It's not all culture. I used to get so upset. I'd go home after teaching classes in Brazil, and I'd see right down the street, and I'd see people just sitting out and just seemingly doing nothing. I think, do you have anything better? I had a whole list of things I had to do that evening. And I remember thinking to myself, people are lazy. They're wasting their lives out there, sitting on their front porch doing what? Rotting? What I didn't realize is that they had worked hard all day, and for them, that was a very important part of their day. My wife and I have now cultivated the habit of going out on our deck in the evening when the weather's okay and soaking in the sunset. God gave us one of the best views of sunsets anywhere in the city. I love Midwest sunsets. You guys have seen some. And we have a deck that's cocked just a little bit toward the southwest, and we get absolutely gorgeous sunsets. We've gotten to the point we can go out there and just sit there and look at the sunset and not even necessarily have to say anything. And it's a meaningful experience. So this is a big one. I hate bringing this up right now in your collegiate phase of life, because you guys don't have any choice. You're behind the 8 ball all the time. I know. If it's any encouragement, I'm supposed to do my oral defense on Tuesday of next week. I'm behind the 8 ball, and who knows, I may scratch before this is over, but anyway. Here's another one. I read in the newspaper, says this author, that in 2017, workers in the United States forfeited 212 million vacation days. I didn't bother to figure out how many years that would be. Somebody want to calculate that for me? 212 million divided by 365. But it amounts to $62.2 billion in lost benefits. People gave up those benefits in order to be productive at work. 580,000 years. In one year, they gave up that. Serious? 212 million divided by 365. Wow. I'm sorry. I don't mean to doubt your math. You're a pilot. You're good with math. Okay. Anybody ever done that? I'm not pointing a finger at it, but you give up vacation time because you want to get something else done at work or something. Abby? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. That's different, right? Yeah, that's something exceptional you're doing. It's a window of time. It's not your career. Yeah. Yeah, I would make that a different category of discussion. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, some companies let you buy vacation time. That's what you're talking about. And again, I'm not saying you're wrong for doing that. Okay, there are times when that might be necessary. There are times when God gives you extra opportunity to work and you need it and you do it. Okay? But this is a trend that we're talking about here. Why is this so important in ministry? Because if you serve the Lord in a country where being is more important than doing, you may find that your goals for your ministry, for your church plant, or whatever you're doing, don't materialize as quickly because people just aren't as ready to jump on it right away. And you might find it easy to accuse them of being lazy or disinterested in the church because they're not moving along as fast as if you are a very well organized, hardworking, let's get this done kind of a person. You're going to have to understand that when you get into a ministry, especially in the 2/3 majority world. Okay, conform to his image. Kenneth Boa. Anybody? We had to read this book for the classes I was taking. The civil religion of America worships the God of progress and inspires us to compete, achieve, and win for the sake of competing, achieving, and winning. Now, understand, he is probably being a little over the top with this statement. I don't think that's true in every case. He's purposely overgeneralizing, stereotyping. He said, we compete, achieve, and win. Why? So that we can compete, achieve, and win. Okay? Life for many people in the business world has been colorfully described as a matter of blowing and going, plotting and planning, ducking and diving, running and gunning, slamming and jamming, moving and shaking, shucking and jiving. I don't know where you got that one. Do you guys ever hear that one before? I don't know. Yeah, I guess. I don't know. Who knows? Then he says later on, longshoreman philosopher Eric Hoffer wrote, we are warned not to waste time, but we're brought up to waste our lives. This is evident in the tragedy of many people who in the first half of their lives spend their health looking for wealth, and in the last half spend their wealth looking for health. Interesting. Of course, again, very stereotypical, very polarized statements, but he's trying to make a point. Yeah. Which reminds me, my wife is on me about working out more, and I'm not doing a really good job at that. So, yeah, I'm looking for health a little bit too. I'm partly guilty. So let's compare doing and being. Okay, now let me give you some notes here, okay, before we get too far down the pike. Okay, number one, the main idea. The being orientation is primarily concerned with overall quality of life. The doing orientation strives to maximize every effort. Can you see how this is related with time that we talked about? Very much related to time. How do I use my time? Okay. And again, we should maximize the opportunities that God gives us. But we should also be concerned with quality of life. Life is a constant, ongoing battle to find the right balance. And the balance for you, Isaac, may not be the same balance as for you, Abby. Everybody's going to arrive at a little different. if you work in a team ministry, some of your colleagues will be CT studs. They get up at 4, they sleep a maximum of 5 hours a night, and they expect everybody else to be up at 4 in the morning. CT stud had a colleague once that said, hey, what do you say I was thinking about the idea of maybe getting up at 5 and early in the morning and singing some hymns and worshiping God. He said, no. He said, by 5 o'clock, you need to have all that behind you. It took the guy totally by surprise. He thought he was being really zealous and suggesting that everybody get up at 5. The stud would have nothing to do with it. By 5 o'clock, you got to have all that behind you and be ready to work. And Stubb was a great guy. In fact, I had a quote on him from him up here. Only one life so soon with Bell, only was done for Christ will last. I admire the guy, but he did struggle in that area, and he ran over some of his colleagues by being that way. So, on the other hand, if you're the kind of person that just isn't all that concerned about deadlines, you may be a cause of stumbling to those who are. So and I had one colleague that was very laid back. He was very Brazilian in the sense that he wasn't that concerned about being on time or exact, and all that. He'd wander in 10, 15 minutes late, and he was okay with that. He wasn't being disrespectful. And I had another colleague that, everything was done by the book, and right now, punctuality. I'm going to deal with that stuff. You guys are going to be teachers. It's not going to be an issue for the most part, right? I mean, class has to begin at a certain time, and that's probably not going to be an issue. Okay, let me give you some things here. Okay, let me just double check something here because this is not in the notes either. I added this. I may put it in the notes someday, but let me I would encourage you to write them down just for your own benefit. In a doing culture, status is earned. Titles are important. That's why in Latin America, for example, it's señor, señora. It's just the title, very important. Tasks and deadlines. Important. Now, you see these two bottom ones. Let me just pause for a second. Status is earned. You work your way up the corporate ladder, to use one expression. That's why titles are important. You worked to earn this title, so you better call me, by whatever title I've earned. Okay, that's why that tasks and deadlines important, and activity in the world. Are you an author who's published books? Have you served as in this position? I've been the senator, I've been, those types of things are very, very important in a doing world because these all show that you have not wasted your life. I have accomplished something in my life, okay? And there's nothing wrong with that in the proper context. In a being culture, status is innate. You were born the son of a king. So you deserve to be respected because your daddy was the king. See, here in our country, you get pulled over by the police for speeding. Well, I'm a state senator. Well, the response is, I don't care if you're the president of the United States. You're going over the speed limit. Well, that wouldn't happen in some cultures. You pull over, you're a senator. Oh, excuse me, sir. I'm very sorry. You let him go on his way. Because to degrade the senator is to degrade the social order, to bring the whole society down. See? Very interesting. Titles are relative in a being culture. It's who you were born into. In India, if you're born into the Brahmin caste, title doesn't mean it's your birth. It's your right of respect because of your birth that makes the difference. And then people in harmony, of course, are more important than tasks and deadlines. We've been down that road already, talking about that. And then intimacy with Christ. Now here I'm bringing it into the Christian context here, okay? Intimacy with Christ is more important than activity in the world. Now, obviously, when we stand before Jesus, we're going to be judged for both of those, right? It's who we are and what we did, okay? I'm going to come back to some passages later on that you guys already know about, but Man, I don't know about you, but when I look at those two lists side by side, I'm thinking, oh man, if I could just strike that balance. I tend to fall on this side over here. I just do. And I'm a Westerner. 19 years in Brazil did not drive that out of me. All right, so let me tell you a story. And I have this on a video, but again, sometimes when we try to upload these for the online students, YouTube sees the video and it crashes the whole recording. And I may have shared this in Intro to Mission, so this may be a repeat for some of you. Okay, a very successful New York businessman goes to Mexico for a visit. And he visits a little quaint village in Mexico. And he sees a guy going out in his boat in the morning, catches some fish and brings them back, prepares it for his family. And he starts having a conversation with this guy. The guy apparently speaks English. And he says, hey, I noticed you've got a nice boat there and you go out every morning to catch fish. He said, oh, yes. He said, actually, I have enough fish to feed my family and have some left over for my friends. Oh, really? And he said, so what do you do the rest of the day? He said, well, after I finish with that, I can go into town and I can sit and have coffee with my friends and I can come home and relax with my family at night. Really? And the New York businessman, the wheels are turning. He's thinking, this guy's got potential he doesn't even know about. He says, I can help you. As if the guy thinks he needs help. The businessman just assumes this guy needs help because he's not reaching his potential. He says, are there a lot of fish out there? Do you just, do you have your good? Oh yeah, there's plenty of fish out there for all of us. So listen, he said, let me help you out. What if you got another boat and you hired somebody to go out with you and you fish together and you catch more fish so you could come in and feed your family, but then you could go to the market and sell them and you make more money. And eventually you could even probably add other boats and you could have a whole fleet before long. And you could be making so much money that you could eventually even travel to New York City someday. And the guy's thinking, wow, interesting. Travel to New York City? Why would I want to go to New York City? Well, he says you could end up with an office up in a high-rise somewhere with a beautiful view of the city and you could run your enterprise from there. The guy's thinking, okay, then what? He said, well, eventually you'd make enough money where you could be free to come back here to Mexico and visit the small town and go in and have coffee with your friends and go home and visit with your family at night. The guy's confused. He's thinking, why do I have to go through all that to enjoy what I've been enjoying for the last 20 years of my life? And so two completely different perspectives arrive at the same objective, Now, you could say, well, okay, that only works as long as this guy's healthy, and you start thinking about insurance and what happens if he can't save up money for his family. Because a being culture doesn't tend to think about all the details down the road, what happens if, and the insurance and need for saving up and all that. They tend to be more of a day-by-day mentality. Again, I'm talking in extremes here. Whereas the doing guy, he's got a plan not just for today, but for the next several years of his life and his family and all that. But interesting story. I don't know if it's a true story, but David Livermore tells it. Okay, so, all right, letter A in your notes. In the work world, do you work to live or do you live to work? Okay, and we've already mentioned that. And hopefully there's a balance. B, there is a correlation between competitive and doing cultures. If you're more of a doing person, you're probably more competitive than somebody that is interested more in quality of life. Okay. C, corporate entities are usually doing cultures. They have to produce. Performance and passion are highly valued. That's letter C. Performance and passion are highly valued. Letter D. In the U.S., a person's two worst moments are, now this is, you guys are in college, you have 7 o'clock classes, so understand this is, okay. In the U.S., a person's two worst moments are 9 a.m. on Monday and the first few months of retirement. I'll stop, think about that for a second. I say 9 o'clock. At 9 o'clock, you guys are already well on your way. You guys have 7 o'clocks? You have any 7 o'clock classes? Yeah. I don't have any 7 o'clock classes either semester. Nice, huh? Yeah. Sip and have coffee with my friends. Well, okay. Yeah, there was an exception because they did that thing, they did that class, what was that thing called? Yeah, so they made me move back from 7:30 to 7 o'clock. I was bummed for a while, but I got over it. Yeah. Yeah. Well, we profs kind of have the same reputation as pastors do. You know, pastors only work one day a week, Sunday, so, you know, what's the big deal? Profs only work a few hours there in the classroom, right? Yeah. All right. So why is this? Why are those the worst two moments, 9 a.m.? You know, let me ask you this. Why is it that Monday morning has a bad rap? What brings that on? Yeah. Yeah. And then, if you're like a lot of people and you don't really relax on the weekend, even though you intended to, you know, you keep you busy, and you feel like you didn't even get your rest, your weekend. So why would retirement be the other end? Why it was so bad? What's the deal with retirement? The first few weeks of retirement. You know who suffers the most from that normally? In a relationship? It's the spouse. Do you have any idea how many wives dread their husband's retirement? Serious. In fact, there are even cases where couples have gotten divorced into the retirement because of the husband just doesn't know what to do with himself. I remember my dad saying, my dad did well in his retirement. He really did. I remember my dad looking at the clock in the kitchen and saying, I can't wait till I retire. The first thing I'm going to do is take that clock off the shelf, off the wall. He retires, you know, and months into his retirement, he's saying, that stupid clock, he can't get away from it. You know, even though he's retired and he doesn't have to get up at a certain time, that crazy clock is still running his life. And there were times when my mom said, Dad, I remember, you all heard horror stories about this. You know, the husband's retired and all of a sudden he's in the kitchen trying to tell his wife how to cook after she's been cooking for 30 years for him, you know. But somehow now all of a sudden she's forgotten how to cook and he's got to tell her how to do it. And so one of the best things that a husband can do when he retires is stay out of the kitchen, unless he's one of those husbands that, you know, has been cooking and helping all along with that. When I'm in the kitchen, I'm usually there either to unload the dishwasher or load the dishwasher. That's about it. Ask me to cook? You're asking me to burn the house down. But that's what happens in doing cultures, especially. You've just had that routine all your life. And all right. Okay. Letter E, people are often categorized by the question, what do you do? We talked about that earlier. What do you do? What kind of work do you do? That sort of thing. Because that's where you find your significance. You guys are all planning for a certain kind of career right now. I mean, I know that not everybody knows exactly what he or she's going to be doing. Is it not true that we find our significance in saying, I am a fill in the blank? And our culture, of course, is trying to teach. Part of being a doing culture is is, the idea that if a woman is just, a homemaker, I mean, the word homemaker is almost a swear word, It's almost a hate crime to call somebody a homemaker, But on the other hand, if God has given you an opportunity to work and given you the skill to do so, then there's nothing wrong with that. So, we bat this thing back and forth. And so it is a real issue. And all right, letter F. It's hard for the doing people to imagine how being people can be successful. You could add other words like productive, in there as well. And that's because success is the ultimate goal in a doing culture. Now, I'm talking about doing culture in general, not one that is dominated by Christian influence. Okay. How many times have you talked to somebody that say, hey, what I want for my kids more, the kids are getting close to graduation from high school, and you'll hear a parent say something like, look, what I most want is just for my son or daughter to be successful, go out and get a good job, be able to be successful. Now, obviously in the Christian community, that shouldn't be the priority, but in this culture, I have a relative who said that, I'm my biggest, every time I'd ask, how are your kids doing? Well, hey, I'm just helping them to find the right path so they can be successful. That's the number one thing. When's the last time you heard a parent say, hey, and again, Christians can say this, but her parents say, I don't care what my son or daughter does. I just want them to be Christ-like, to be godly. I mean, and hopefully you've heard that sort of thing even in your home, but that's not typical in this culture. All right. There are different spheres where this plays out: home, work, recreation, church, in your walk with God. And again, these are not blanks in your notes, so I'm just making observations here. If you tend to be a doing kind of a person, that's probably going to play out in all of these to some degree. Okay? It's one of those things that affects every aspect of your life. If you're a being person, you're more concerned about quality of life, that will resonate in all of those. I can't see that. What is that? 11:48. Okay, let me ask you a question. Just let's take recreation here in the middle. What kind of recreation do you enjoy? When you think of being able just to get away and doing something like that, what comes to your mind? What kind of things? Yeah, Liz? Woo-hoo-hoo. Okay. All right, good. Somebody else. Recreation. Yeah. Hikes. All right. You are from Minnesota, aren't you? You're from Iowa. Interesting. All right. Cool. What else we like to do? Recreation. I didn't. Yeah. That's cool. Yeah. Go with friends and walk down the beach. That's recreation for you. Neat. What's that? Shopping. Oh, wow. Yeah, here's where husbands and wives can really get into it. When men go shopping, what's their end game? I watched a commercial once where they were in a woman's clothing store or some clothing store, and the wives were all shopping. The men all gathered together underneath one of those round things where you hang the dresses, and they were all hiding in there, having a party together while their wives were out shopping. Yeah, the end game for the man is usually get it, buy it, and get out. And what's the woman's end game? Yeah. Oh, this looks pretty. Is she going to buy one? Does she need one? No, but it's worth window shopping. Now, okay, guys, you go to Best Buy or Home Depot. Now the men get into window shopping, right? They know they can't afford that saw, but it sure is nice to look at it. So we're just as guilty as the ladies are sometimes. Do you have your hand up? Yeah. Neat. Okay. Have you been to Des Moines Symphony? Yeah. I took my wife there, was it last year, to hear Gil Shaham. Oh, man, what a concert. That was beautiful. Anybody else? Yeah, recreation. Hannah? Huh? Oh, wow, hiking and snowboarding. Wow, that's neat. Yeah. Okay, you like physical more than mental activity. Okay. And that's not a doing versus being thing. You can be doing and being in both of those, you know. But, yeah. Anybody else? Your form of recreation. Yeah. I enjoy being home. I'm a homebody. I really do. I like being home, and I like watching a series with my wife or something. You know, we've been watching All Creatures Great and Small. I think that's the name of it. It's a BBC thing. I enjoy that. Yeah. Now, I'm not saying that depending on the kind of recreation you like, you are either a doing or a being person. Because like I said, you can be either one of those, and you know, the kind of recreation you like is a lot more complicated than just that. You're a doing or being. But when you said you like to just curl up in a chair, you know, it's not like, oh, I got this free time, I got, you know, this little vacation time, I've got to do something productive. No, you just want to relax. Although you might think reading as being a productive thing too, right? Yeah. But when you sit down to read, do you like to read something related to your profession, or do you prefer to, you know, read something totally different, a novel or a devotional thing, or? Okay. All right. You're balanced. That's good. That's good. Some people, they feel like they can't read something unless it has something to do with their profession. They got to catch up. They're behind on this area, that area, and again, there's some really good counsel in saying if you're going to read something totally different from what you're doing for a living, because you need that balance. Okay, well, I just thought that was an interesting church. Yeah, okay, well, we'll move on. There's something else that's not in your notes. In being mode, the mind has nothing to do, nowhere to go. Now, again, this is very, very extreme. And can focus fully on moment-by-moment experience, allowing us to be fully present and aware of whatever is here right now. Okay, now notice this is mindful.org. This is not a Christian site. The idea is that in a being culture, you can put your mind in neutral and just enjoy. In a doing culture, you can't do that because you're constantly thinking about what's next, what's next, what's next, what's next. You gotta get things done. But in a being culture, you can, and none of us would agree with that, with the mind going into neutral. Same site says in doing mode, by contrast, this wonderful multi-dimensional complexity of experience is boiled down to a narrow one-dimensional focus. What does this have to say about my progress in reaching my goals? In other words, if you're the kind of person that can't use free time for something that's totally unrelated to your work, you're probably stuck in more of the doing rut. You know, and I have that problem. I really do. If I'm going to read a book, I tend to want to read something that's halfway related to you know, what I'm doing as a career. Yeah. Here's another one. Instead of looking at your day as an endless to-do list, what if you started each day with a question, at the end of the day, how do I want to feel? Now again, this person is not a Christian, okay? After you ponder that one, you can ask yourself, what will make me feel that way? Even though that's not a Christian, I wouldn't say it that way as a Christian, there is a certain sense in which a Christian can apply this. In other words, when she says, at the end of the day, how do I want to feel? As a Christian, I might say, at the end of the day, how has this impacted my relationship with Christ? Okay? And so, you know, I can ask after I ponder that, I can ask, you know, what will help me to sense that intimacy with Christ? In fact, he's been touching on that in chapel and talking about prayer. So she's saying it a different way as an unbeliever, but there is an application for a Christian in this as well. Yeah. I mean, why is it that we as Americans have so much trouble with the art of meditation? We've pretty much relegated that to New Age and, the Eastern religions and stuff. Meditation is very much a Christian idea. And I think it ties into what he was saying about prayer as well. All right. All right, being and doing. Okay, now I'm going to skip because I already gave you some of this stuff. So just give me a moment here to. I rearranged a few slides. Let me just zip ahead here a little bit, if I may. Oh dear, what did I just do? Okay. Okay, let's go down to in schools. Yes. Okay, in schools, how does this play out? Well, in Japan, Lana, and you can comment on this if you'd like, students go to school 6 days a week for more than 1,000 hours a year. So do you have school on Saturdays in Japan? Or Sunday? Like every other week? Okay, so there are classes. Okay, and so apparently it's not every week or everywhere. Mm-hmm. Okay, interesting. Yeah. Okay. A lot of competition to get a university position. I don't know about Japan. You can tell me. In Brazil, in most universities, you can't just be. There are caps on how many people. There are limits, and you have to take an exam. You do that in Japan as well. If you don't pass that exam, you don't get into the university. Okay. I mean, there may be schools like that here in the U.S. I'm not aware of any major university where you have to take an entrance exam to get. I'm sure that maybe some of the more elite schools are. Yeah, I'm talking more about entrance into a bachelor level. Even I read out of high school in Brazil, they have to take an entrance exam just to enter an undergrad course in a university. And if you don't pass that, in fact, for many Brazilians, that is the most nervous part of their lives, because that's the moment where they find out what their career is going to be, or what's the future. Is that true in Peru as well? They take an entrance exam in Chile also? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that can be heartbreaking for a young person. In Germany, they're already starting even younger in determining, what direction you're going to be going in school. I don't remember the exact age. If you guys studied that in your classes at all, in your education classes, or whoever's doing education. Okay. But I mean, it's pretty young. And now, by contrast, in Finland, Scandinavian, students study 600 hours a year as opposed to, 1,000 in the US and Japan. And Korea also has a lot shorter. And that's just over half, 60% of the time. Right? Two of the highest ranking education systems in the world are also very, very different in their being versus doing mentality. So here's 600 years in, oh dear, is that Korea? Oh, help me. Lana, is that Korea on the left? I can't remember. Japan on the right, we know that. Yeah, oh dear. It may be Finland. I'm sorry, there goes my geography out the window. Don't tell Mr. Horner. Does somebody know? Who are the geographers here? Can you help me out? I think it's either Finland. It might be Finland. Okay. That's embarrassing. But don't worry, I'm more of a being person than a doing person. All right. Number 6, being normally goes with polychronic cultures. Well, that makes sense. If you're, obviously, if you're a doing person, you're going to be much more monochronic. Stick to a linear schedule. But in a being culture, it's not all that big of a deal. All right. Number 7, how does environment shape whether a culture is being or doing? How does environment? Well, we've already talked a little bit about this issue. The industrial cultures are normally doing cultures. Remember, time is money, and efficiency is money. Everything is money. Economics drive the Western world. They just do. Capitalism is, and so the industrialization, sales, and all that, very, very much a doing mentality. Agricultural cultures are normally being cultures. So who grew up on a farm here? Nobody in this class grew up on a farm? What, you live, okay. So is your lifestyle, even though you're not on a farm, does it tend to blend in more to the rural lifestyle? More relaxed or not? What's your dad do for a living? Okay, cool. All right. The interesting influence of light and darkness. This is interesting. Anybody grew up in the north where you have these long nights? Yeah, you're up in Manistee, right? So at the darkest time of the year, when is sunrise and sunset up there? So you have sunlight from 8 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon. Yeah, but in July, you're up all night. My brother lived up there in Sugar Island. I think I told you about that in his neck of the woods. The interesting studies about light and darkness. The seasons influence people's behavior. You believe that? I mean, you should, if you're from a 4-season climate like ours here, you see that. I am very, very attached to the seasons, both positively and negatively, especially when I take my dogs out at 5:15 every morning. Our Bernedoodle is up with her paws on the bed, and then she's doing this to me, trying to get my attention. And I won't tell you what I'm thinking at that time because it wouldn't be appropriate. But I take them out. Now, my wife, we first got them, I said, honey, she was your idea, you take. But I've kind of, I take them out. But I'm standing out there when it's below zero, watching this dog sniff for 5 minutes, trying to find where she's finally going to go to the bathroom. And I'm thinking, I'm thinking a lot of things that I wouldn't be thinking about in July if I take her outside. I'm enjoying it in July. Some people who live in especially dark climates may suffer from what they call adaptive lethargy. There's an actual physical impact that causes your body to just want to shut down more because it's dark. And I'm not into the medical part of this, but what is that ingredient that comes in, that causes you to wake up when the light comes in even though your eyes are closed? Yeah. What is melatonin? Yeah, you guys have probably all heard of that, right? Yeah, but it's related to the light. So if the light's not there, your body can actually physically, and you're tempted to think, well, this is just a spiritual problem, but it really is more than that. And if any of you end up ministering like in, the extreme Northwest, you up in Seattle in that area and in Alaska, you may, in fact, some mission agencies will actually almost require their missionaries up in those areas, way up in the Nordic world, to take shorter, to serve shorter terms of service in the field. Come home, take longer because of that. Now, if you grow up in that, you've learned to adapt a little bit more. But if you're not from that part of the world and all of a sudden you're there, it can be devastating. And you can deceive yourself into thinking it's just a spiritual problem when in reality it's not. Okay. People who adjust their activities for the seasons are less bothered by varying weather. Agricultural people, you learn to deal with weather. And by the way, in the second half of the semester, we're going to talk about an entire region of the world, including Russia and surrounding countries, that historically have learned to live with that. Okay, but we'll get to that another time. D, being cultures adapt better to the natural environment than doing cultures. How do doing cultures adapt to the natural environment? Think about it. What have we done to adapt to the weather, natural environment? Pardon? Okay, that's one thing. Yeah, we do have daylight savings time to help with that. What else have we done? Okay, yeah, well, warmer clothes, yeah. And take it even a step farther. I mean, we've come up with ways technologically to ignore certain things, right? We climatize buildings. We invented the light bulb so you can stay up all night and it's just like daytime, right? So that's all part of the Industrial Revolution. When you study the Industrial Revolution, just start thinking about how many things were invented in order to overcome nature, right? Climate, right? Humidity, light and dark, all those things. A lot of inventions are intended to be able to continue working at the same pace regardless of what it's doing outside. Yeah. Which I'm thankful for. I enjoy riding in a car that I can, climatize. I still, though, have never had a car that has a remote start on it. My son has already had 2 cars with remote starts on them, and I don't like that. I'm jealous. But I am thankful that I don't have leather seats. Leather seats are supposed to be really cool until it's really cold outside and you get in. I am very thankful for my cheap cloth-covered seats. Because in the summertime, I don't burn myself, and in the winter, I don't freeze myself. Anyway, doing culture, spend less time outside, generally, right? Unless you like snowboarding, right? Then I still can't figure out Minnesotans, and I'm being stereotypical here. I ask them, what's your favorite season of the year? Oh, winter. They don't even pause. Winter. I'm thinking, winter? Why? I like cold. I hate heat. I just haven't figured that out yet. Any of you guys like that? You're the cold weather people. You much prefer. Well, Manistee. Okay. Yeah, but you're not from way up there. You prefer winter to summer? It does get hot. I remember in Brazil lying there thinking, oh man, if it would just snow one day out of the year, I felt like the guy that wanted to dip his finger in, just give me one winter day. When we came home on furlough, I kid you not, here I am in my 30s, okay, even 40s, even in my 50s. I come home for furlough, and if we don't get snow for Christmas, I'm really bummed. Now that I live here, we get enough snow, I don't care. But, All right, slow movement. Okay, let me see where we are here. Yeah, okay. Number 9, some people in doing cultures have attempted to modify their pace of life. That's the blank there. Their pace of life using techniques such as slowness movements. I thought this was interesting. It's a cultural revolution against the notion that faster is always better. The slow philosophy is not about doing everything at a snail's pace. It's about seeking to do everything at the right speed, savoring the hours and minutes rather than just counting them, doing everything as well as possible instead of as fast as possible. It's about quality over quantity and everything from work to food to parenting. Okay, look, I don't know how you guys are behind the wheel, but I'm sitting at a light, and when that light turns green, I'm going to, 2 lanes going the same way. There's a guy next to me. I have to get out ahead of him. And you know what happens 90% of the time? I get out ahead, and then we get down to the next light, Light changes, I stop, and here he comes. Right there. We both end up in the same exact place. And I'm sitting there thinking, why did I waste gas and hard on my engine just to get ahead of this guy? But you know what happens when light turns green? Same thing. I'm off again. Because I'm thinking sooner or later, I'm going to make the light and he's going to catch it. Just don't do that in an airplane. Right. I knew two pilots, or I knew a pilot in Brazil, and we were at an airport once, and another pilot was taking off, and they both had their own private airplanes. The guy took off, and the pilot standing next to me says, watch where he takes off. Watch where the plane goes. I watch. See right there? He said, now you watch when I take off. He left about a half hour later. He said, you watch, I'll get off the ground sooner. And he did. And he had a more powerful plane. That meant a lot to him. Get off sooner. So competition and doing, very much partners in crime. All right? Whereas cooperation and being tend to go together as well. All right. So, real quickly here, we're about out of time. Okay. Yeah, we did this before, did we not? Yeah, we'll skip that one. Okay. Number 10, how can we use this understanding in our travels, relationships, and work? I'm going to skip this slide for the moment. Letter A, interacting with a being culture. Here's a couple of suggestions. Discover who people are beyond their work. If you are ministering or serving or working in a being culture, don't start with what they do for a living, okay? Look beyond their families, talk to them about their country, sports or whatever. 2, recognize the presence of a more indirect communication style. Don't ask pointed questions because you'll scare them away. Just telling you. They'll feel threatened and they'll want to avoid you. B, interacting with a doing culture. Provide feedback on performance. Now it's just the opposite. So tell me about your business. How's that going for you? And they'll love it because that's what their life is all about. And 2, recognize the presence of a more direct, blunt communication style. And so in that case, if you start beating around the bush, they're sitting there thinking, come on, we're wasting time here. So be sensitive to the kind of culture into which God has placed you. And I do have a few other slides, but like we did today, I'll bring those up. Now, Tuesday is Reverend Bill Jenkins. So we won't move on with this until Thursday of next week. All right. Thank you.